Welcome back to English Talk Time, the place where you train your brain to speak real English every single day. And today we're going to fix something that is secretly slowing you down more than anything else.
You understand English, you recognize the words, you even know what you want to say, but when it's time to speak, your brain feels slow and everything gets stuck.
That's not because you're bad at English. It's because your brain is still translating instead of thinking directly in English.
And once you fix this one habit, your speaking speed, your confidence, and your fluency will change faster than you expect.
So in this episode, we're going to train your mind to think in English faster using a simple daily listening method that actually works in real life. Let's understand what's really happening inside your mind. Because once you see this clearly, everything about your English will start to make sense.
Most people think they're slow because they don't know enough English, but that's not true. The real problem is how your brain is processing the language.
Exactly. Your brain is not struggling with English itself. It's struggling with the extra steps you've been trained to use.
And those steps are invisible, which is why so many learners don't even realize they're doing it.
Here's what actually happens when someone speaks to you in English. You hear the sentence, then your brain quickly translates it into your own language. Then you think of a response in your language, and then you translate it back into English before speaking.
And all of that happens in just a few seconds. But those few seconds are enough to make you feel slow, awkward, and disconnected in conversations.
Exactly. And while you're going through all those steps, the other person is already moving forward. The conversation continues, and you feel like you're always one step behind.
That's why you sometimes understand everything but still can't respond quickly, and that creates frustration.
And that frustration slowly turns into doubt. You start thinking, maybe your English is not good enough. Maybe you need more vocabulary. Maybe you need more grammar.
But the truth is, you don't need more information. You need a better system.
Yes, because right now your brain is working like a translator, not like a speaker.
And translators are always slower than speakers, because they depend on two languages instead of one.
Exactly. And that dependency is what's holding you back. Not your intelligence, not your ability, but the method you've been using.
Let's make this even simpler. Imagine you're trying to have a conversation, but every time you want to speak, you have to go through a middle person who converts your thoughts into English.
That middle person is your translation habit. And as long as that habit exists, your speech will never feel natural or fast.
And this is why some people who know less grammar can actually speak faster than those who studied for years, because they trained their brain differently.
They removed the extra steps. They built direct connections between English and meaning, instead of going through their native language every time.
And once that direct connection starts forming, something interesting happens. Your brain begins to recognize patterns automatically.
Words are no longer something you translate. They become something you instantly understand and use.
And that's when English starts to feel lighter, smoother, and more natural.
But until that shift happens, everything feels heavy, like your brain is carrying extra weight in every conversation.
And that's exactly why you feel tired after speaking English for even a short time.
Because your brain is doing double work, thinking in one language and speaking in another.
So the goal is not to learn more English. The goal is to remove those extra steps.
And once you remove them, speed comes naturally, confidence increases, and speaking becomes much easier.
So if you've been feeling slow, stuck, or frustrated, understand this clearly. Nothing is wrong with you.
Your brain just needs to be trained differently. And that's exactly what we're going to start doing from this point forward. Now that you understand why your brain feels slow, let's talk about the solution. And this is where everything starts to change in a very real way.
And the solution is not more studying, not more grammar, not more memorizing. It's something much simpler, but much more powerful.
It's daily listening, but not the way you've been doing it before.
Because most people listen passively, they play English in the background, they hear it, but they don't really engage with it.
And passive listening might feel useful, but it doesn't train your brain to think faster.
What actually rewires your brain is active listening, where your mind is fully involved in what you hear.
Let me explain something important about your brain. Your brain learns language through patterns, not through rules.
That's why children become fluent without ever studying grammar. They hear patterns again and again until those patterns become automatic.
And right now, your brain doesn't have enough English patterns stored in a fast, automatic way.
So every time you want to speak, your brain has to build sentences from scratch, and that takes time.
But when you listen daily, something powerful begins to happen. Your brain starts recognizing common sentence structures without effort.
Instead of thinking word by word, you start thinking in chunks, in natural phrases.
And those chunks are the key to speed, because your brain can use them instantly without stopping to translate.
For example, instead of thinking, I am going to, one word at a time, your brain learns the whole phrase as one unit.
And once that happens, your response becomes faster, smoother, and more natural.
But here's where most people go wrong. They listen once and move on.
Exactly. They treat listening like entertainment, not like training.
But if you really want to rewire your brain, repetition is everything.
Listening to the same type of English daily builds familiarity, and familiarity builds speed.
Think about a song you love. The more you hear it, the less you have to think about it. You just know it.
And language works exactly the same way. Repetition removes effort.
So instead of asking, did I understand this perfectly?
Ask, did I train my brain with this today?
Because the goal is not perfection. The goal is exposure and repetition.
The more your brain hears natural English, the more it starts predicting what comes next.
And when your brain can predict, it doesn't need to translate anymore.
That's the moment where thinking becomes faster, because your brain is no longer reacting slowly, it's responding automatically.
And this is why daily listening is so powerful. It changes your brain from a translator into a predictor.
But let's go even deeper. Daily listening also builds something most learners ignore: confidence.
Because when your brain becomes familiar with English sounds and patterns, you feel less pressure when speaking.
You stop overthinking every word, because you've already heard those patterns many times before.
And that familiarity removes fear, because nothing feels completely new anymore.
So instead of feeling lost in conversations, you start feeling connected.
Instead of feeling slow, you start feeling responsive.
Instead of thinking too much, you start speaking more naturally.
And all of this comes from one simple habit: listening every single day with intention.
Not for hours, not in a complicated way, just consistently.
Even 15 to 20 minutes of focused listening can start changing how your brain processes English.
But only if you do it every day, because consistency is what creates transformation.
So from now on, don't treat listening as something optional.
Treat it as daily training for your brain.
Because every time you listen, you are building faster connections.
Every time you repeat, you are strengthening those connections.
And every single day, your thinking speed improves without you even noticing it immediately.
And one day, you'll be in a conversation, and something surprising will happen.
You'll respond faster than before,
Without translating.
without overthinking.
And that's when you'll realize something very important.
Your brain has changed.
Now that we understand why listening is powerful, let's go one level deeper. Because listening alone is not enough unless you know how to use it correctly.
Exactly. A lot of people listen every day, but they still don't see real change. And that's because they're missing one critical step.
And that step is turning listening into thinking.
Because the goal is not just to hear English. The goal is to make your brain start operating in English.
Right now, your brain is still using your native language as the main system, and English is just something you translate into.
But if you want to think faster, you have to replace that system completely.
And this doesn't happen by force. It happens by training your brain in small, consistent steps.
So let's break this down in a very simple and practical way that you can start using today. Step 1. Connect English directly to meaning.
The first thing you need to do is stop connecting English to your language and start connecting English directly to meaning.
That means when you hear a word, you don't translate it. You visualize it. You feel it. You understand it instantly.
For example, when you hear the word coffee, you don't think of the word in your language first. You picture the cup, the smell, the experience.
And this might feel strange at first, but this is exactly how natural language works.
Translation is a shortcut that slows you down. Direct connection is what makes you faster.
And every time you choose not to translate, you're strengthening that direct connection. Step 2. Think in simple English throughout your day.
The second step is to bring English into your daily thoughts, not just when you're studying, but all the time.
This is where real transformation begins, because now English is no longer something you practice, it becomes something you live.
Start with very simple thoughts. Don't try to be perfect. Don't try to sound advanced.
Just describe what's happening around you in basic English.
I'm walking. I'm tired. I need water.
These small sentences may seem simple, but they are building something powerful inside your brain.
Because every time you think in English, you're removing the need for translation.
And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. Step 3. Use listening as a model for thinking.
Now, here's where listening connects directly to thinking.
Everything you listen to becomes a model for your brain.
When you hear natural English repeatedly, your brain starts copying those patterns automatically.
And those patterns become the way you think.
So instead of creating sentences from scratch, your brain starts using what it has already heard.
And that's what makes your thinking faster, because you're not building, you're recalling.
This is exactly how native speakers operate. They don't think word by word, they think in patterns.
And now you're training your brain to do the same. Step 4. Speak your thoughts out loud.
The next step is very important, and most people skip it.
Speaking your thoughts out loud.
Thinking is powerful, but speaking makes it real.
When you speak, your brain, your mouth, and your memory all start working together.
Even if you're alone, even if it feels strange, speak anyway.
Because fluency is not built silently, it's built through expression. Step 5. Accept imperfection and keep moving.
Now let's talk about something that stops people from doing all of this.
The need to be perfect.
If you wait to think perfectly in English, you will never start thinking in English.
Because thinking itself is a process, not a performance.
Your thoughts don't need to be correct. They just need to exist.
And over time, they naturally become clearer, stronger, and more accurate. Step 6. Consistency creates automatic thinking.
And finally, this is where everything connects together.
Consistency.
You don't need to do everything perfectly. You just need to do it daily.
Because repetition is what turns effort into automation.
At first, thinking in English feels slow and forced.
But with daily practice, it becomes easier.
Then natural.
Then, automatic. Slow emotional build.
And one day, something unexpected happens.
You stop translating completely.
You hear English.
You understand instantly.
You respond.
Without thinking twice. Final reflection.
That's the moment your brain has fully adapted.
That's the moment you are no longer learning English. Both. You are thinking in it.
Now we need to talk about something that quietly controls everything we've discussed so far. And this is the point where most learners get stuck without even realizing it.
Yes, because even if you understand the method, even if you know you should think in English, even if you try to listen daily, there is still something that stops you from actually doing it consistently.
And that something is fear.
Not fear of English itself, but fear of making mistakes, fear of sounding wrong, fear of being judged, and sometimes even fear of not being taken seriously.
And this fear doesn't always feel strong or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it shows up as hesitation, as delay, as overthinking.
You tell yourself, let me think a little more, or let me say it perfectly, but what you're really doing is avoiding the moment.
Because the truth is, speaking a new language puts you in a vulnerable position.
In your native language, you feel intelligent, expressive, confident, but in English, you suddenly feel limited.
You can't express your full personality. Your thoughts feel smaller. Your sentences feel weaker. And that creates discomfort.
And instead of facing that discomfort, most people choose to stay silent.
They listen. They understand. They stay in their head. But they don't speak. Slow, emotional pause.
And every time you stay silent, something happens inside your brain.
Your brain learns that silence is safer than speaking.
And the more you repeat that pattern, the stronger it becomes.
Until speaking starts to feel like a risk instead of an opportunity. Pause.
But here's the truth you need to understand if you want to move forward.
Fluency is not built in silence.
It's built in action.
And that action will never feel comfortable at the beginning.
In fact, discomfort is a sign that you are doing something right. Pause for impact.
Let's change the way you see mistakes, because this is where everything shifts.
Most learners see mistakes as failure, something to avoid, something to hide.
But mistakes are actually signals of progress.
Every mistake means you tried, you pushed your brain, you stepped outside your comfort zone,
And that's exactly how growth happens.
Think about it like this. When a child learns to speak, they make thousands of mistakes, but no one tells them to stop. No one expects perfection.
And because of that, they keep trying, they keep speaking, and eventually, they become fluent.
But as adults, we do the opposite. We wait, we hesitate, we try to be perfect before we speak.
And that delay slows everything down. Pause.
So what's the solution?
You need to change your relationship with fear.
Instead of avoiding it, you move through it.
Instead of waiting for confidence, you create confidence by speaking.
And this is the key idea. Confidence is not the starting point, it's the result.
The more you speak, the more your brain realizes that nothing bad happens.
And slowly, that fear starts to lose its power.
Not because it disappears completely, but because you stop listening to it. Slow build.
So let's make this very practical.
The next time you have a chance to speak English, don't wait for the perfect sentence.
Don't wait for the perfect moment.
Just say something.
Even if it's simple,
Even if it's not perfect,
even if your voice feels uncertain,
say it anyway. Pause for impact.
because every time you speak, you are training your brain to act instead of hesitate.
You are breaking the pattern of silence.
And that repetition is what creates change.
The first time feels difficult,
The second time feels slightly easier,
then easier again.
until one day you speak without fear, soft, emotional, close.
And here's the most important part.
When you stop being afraid to speak, you stop being afraid to be yourself.
Even in English,
And that is the moment where fluency becomes real. Final reflection.
so don't wait to feel ready.
Because you will never feel completely ready.
Speak now,
Grow now.
and let confidence catch up later. If you've stayed with us until this point, that means something important about you. It means you're not just learning English, you're trying to change the way you think.
And that is the real difference. Because fluency doesn't begin with words. It begins with a decision. The decision to stop translating, to stop waiting, and to start using English as part of your daily life.
You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to know everything. You just need to show up and use what you already have.
Some days will feel easy, some days will feel slow, and some days you might feel like nothing is changing. But even in those moments, your brain is adapting, building connections, getting stronger.
Every time you listen, every time you think in English, every time you speak even a simple sentence, you are moving forward.
And progress in language is not always visible immediately, but it is always happening in the background.
One day, without warning, you'll notice something different.
You'll respond faster than before.
You'll understand without translating.
You'll speak without overthinking.
And in that moment, you'll realize something powerful.
You're no longer trying to learn English.
B is greater than. You're living it. So from today, don't go back to the old way of learning.
Don't treat English like a subject you study once in a while.
Make it part of your thoughts,
Make it part of your daily life,
even if it's small.
even if it's simple,
Just stay consistent.
because consistency is what turns effort into fluency.
And before you go, we want to hear from you.
Where are you watching from? And what time is it in your country right now?
Drop it in the comments. We read every single one.
And come back tomorrow, because your English grows every single day you show up.
B is greater than. See you in the next episode. Keep thinking, keep speaking,